In the annals of history, from the sacred texts of ancient religions to the dusty scrolls of lost civilizations, few figures capture the imagination and fear like that of the witch. With powers beyond the comprehension of common folk, witches have become synonymous with the mysterious, the forbidden, and the dangerous. But there is a trio of such figures, shrouded in the mists of biblical antiquity, whose tales are laced with an intrigue and a darkness that still echo through the ages. These are not just any witches, but those who have been immortalized in the most widely read book in human history, the Bible. Their names are the Harlot of Babylon, the Witch of Endor, and Jezebel. But who were they, really? Were they wielders of dark powers, or merely women who fell afoul of the laws and societal norms of their time? And what can their stories reveal to us about the fears and beliefs of those who wrote about them? Get ready to embark on a journey into the heart of mystery, as we venture into the world of the Bible's most infamous witches. But be warned, the stories you are about to hear are not for the faint of heart. They paint a picture of a world where power, religion, and gender collide in dramatic and often deadly ways. Hold on to your seats, for we are about to begin a voyage into the shadows of biblical history. The Harlot of Babylon. In the depths of the wilderness, an ominous figure emerged, a woman of immense influence and power, known to many as the Harlot of Babylon. The Bible paints a terrifying portrait of this entity. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great harlot, who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." This woman was not ordinary. She was a force of corruption, a figure of ostentation and sin. She was described as sitting on a scarlet beast covered with blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Clothed in purple and scarlet, she was bedecked with gold, precious stones, and pearls, a vision of allure and menace simultaneously. In her hand, she held a golden cup filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries, a testament to her role as a seductress of nations. She wore a name on her forehead, a mysterious name that bare witness to her dark power: Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth own. The sight of her, drunk with the blood of God's holy people, those who bar testimony to Jesus, was enough to astonish any observer. The angel then explained the mystery of this woman and of the beast she rode, providing a chilling prophecy of a beast that once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. The beast's reappearance was foretold to astonish those whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world. The woman's power was far-reaching and terrifying. The waters you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. She held sway over the many, her influence seducing and intoxicating entire nations. However, her demise was also foreseen. The beast and the 10 horns were predicted to hate the harlot. They were to bring her to ruin, leave her naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. Thus, the Harlot of Babylon stands as a symbol of ultimate depravity and power in the biblical narrative, a figure of terror who led nations astray but was ultimately destined for destruction. Her image was one that inspired fear and dread, a stark warning against the seduction of sin and the intoxication of power. The Witch of Endor. In the days of old, when the Philistines prepared their troops for war against Israel, fear was a palpable presence. The armies had gathered, their forces looming large and menacing over the Israeli landscape. Saul, the king of Israel, had seen the Philistine camp and was struck by a terror so deep, it left him desperate for answers, desperate for any kind of divine guidance. But the heavens were silent. The Lord did not answer him, not by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by the prophets. It was in this state of dread and despair that Saul sought the counsel of the Witch of Endor. This decision in itself was shrouded in fear and trepidation, for he had previously removed all mediums and magicians from the land. Now, however, the king was desperate. He needed to know what the future held for him and his people, and in the absence of divine communication, he turned to the forbidden, a medium, a conduit to the dead. "Find me a woman who is a medium, so that I may go to her and inquire of her," he instructed his servants. Saul traveled in disguise to the woman, accompanied by 2 of his men. They approached her under the cover of darkness, their journey cloaked in secrecy and fear. The Witch of Endor was no fool. She knew the risks of her craft and that had outlawed it. When Saul requested her services, she was wary, fully aware of the trap she was being lured into. But Saul swore an oath to her by the Lord, "As surely as the Lord lives, you will not incur guilt in this matter." He asked her to conjure up the spirit of the deceased prophet Samuel. When the woman saw Samuel, she let out a loud cry, her fear echoing in the silence of the night. The sight was so terrifying that she accused Saul of deceiving her. "You are Saul," she exclaimed. Saul, however, was desperate for answers. He urged her to describe what she saw. "An old man is coming up. He is wrapped in a robe." Upon hearing this, Saul recognized it was Samuel. He bowed his face toward the ground and kneeled down, a gesture of reverence, but perhaps also an instinctive response to the fear that gripped him. The conversation that followed was a chilling prophecy of doom. Samuel, speaking through the Witch of Endor, told Saul that the Lord had turned away from him and had become his enemy. "The Lord will hand you and Israel over to the Philistines. Tomorrow both you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also hand the army of Israel over to the Philistines." These words, delivered from beyond the grave, filled Saul with such terror that he quickly fell full length on the ground, drained of energy and paralyzed by fear. Even the Witch of Endor, seeing the king's terror, felt the chill of the prophecy's implications. The Witch of Endor, feared and shunned, became a harbinger of doom that night. She was a figure of fear, her power to communicate with the dead a terrifying prospect to all who dared to seek her out. Her presence in the narrative is a stark reminder of the fear that the unknown and the supernatural can instill, a fear that persists even when one is desperate for answers. The Witch of Endor may have been a figure of the past, but her story continues to inspire awe and terror, reminding us of the fearful power of the unseen and the unknown. Jezebel. The story of Jezebel, a character who emerges from the annals of biblical history, is one filled with terror and fear, a tale that echoes across the centuries. This powerful and formidable queen of Israel, known as much for her audacity and cunning as for her ruthless pursuit of power, has become a symbol of wickedness and deceit. Although Jezebel's tale is complex and multifaceted, I will focus on several key episodes that highlight her terrifying nature and the fear she inspired. Please note that the following narrative is based on the available biblical accounts, primarily from the books of Kings. The narrative commences when Jezebel, a Phoenician princess, is wedded to Ahab, the king of Israel. From the outset, Jezebel is portrayed as a force to be reckoned with, unafraid to impose her beliefs on her new kingdom. She worships Baal, a Phoenician deity, and not only imports her religion into Israel, but also actively seeks to suppress the worship of Yahweh, the God of Israel. This religious conflict sets the stage for a series of tumultuous events that define her reign. Perhaps the most infamous episode in Jezebel's story is her orchestration of the murder of Naboth, a humble vineyard owner. Naboth's vineyard was coveted by King Ahab, but Naboth, citing God's laws, refused to sell his ancestral land. Jezebel, incensed by this refusal, plotted a scheme that demonstrated her terrifying ruthlessness. She had Naboth falsely accused of cursing both God and the king, leading to his execution. This act of treachery cleared the way for Ahab to seize the vineyard, But it also brought down God's wrath on the royal couple, with the prophet Elijah prophesying doom for both Ahab and Jezebel. Jezebel's religious fanaticism was also a source of fear. She heads a group of people to eliminate the prophets of Yahweh, leading to a period of violent religious conflict. It was during this time that the prophet Elijah emerged as a significant adversary. The contest at Mount Carmel, where Elijah challenged 450 prophets of Baal in a test of divine power, resulted in a dramatic victory for Elijah. However, instead of submitting to the demonstrated supremacy of Yahweh, Jezebel threatened Elijah's life, forcing him to flee. In the end, Jezebel met a gruesome demise as prophesied by Elijah. Thrown out of a window by her own servants, her body was left to be devoured by dogs, a terrifying end befitting her terrifying reign. However, this narrative leaves some gaps due to the complexity and broad scope of the biblical accounts. For example, we have not been able to fully explore the role of Jezebel as a symbol of sexual immorality as described in the book of Revelation, or the story of the Witch of Endor who terrified King Saul by invoking the spirit of the prophet Samuel. Despite these gaps, Jezebel's story is one of unabashed ambition, religious conflict, and a relentless pursuit of power, making her one of the most terrifying figures in biblical lore. Her name endures as a symbol of wickedness, a testament to the fear she instilled in those who crossed her path. These three women, Jezebel, the Witch of Endor, and the Harlot of Babylon, represent different facets of fear, power, and the supernatural as depicted in biblical lore. Their stories intertwine religion, morality, and the human condition, revealing the complex and often terrifying interplay between faith and fear. The enduring legacies of these figures continue to captivate and intrigue, bearing testament to the timeless allure of the mysterious and the macabre. If you liked this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel.